Hey class, today we're going to be talking about distance and midpoints. These are two skills that you're going to need for middle school and high school, but today we're just going to talk about the basic concepts of them just to get you comfortable with using them. Can anyone tell me what distance means?
Distance means the amount of space from one place to another.
Good! Distance is a measurement of length from one point to another point. Now, how do we measure distance?
You take one spot and subtract it from the other spot.
That's a good idea, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for. Any other ideas?
With a ruler!
A ruler! That is good. Yes, we can measure distance with a ruler. There are other types of distance measuring objects, but today we're just going to use a ruler because we're just measuring some smaller line segments, and all we need is our simple ruler. Okay. Today we're going to measure a line segment from one end point to another end point. Can anyone tell me what a line segment is?
A piece of a line.
That is good. Okay, a line segment is just a piece of a line. It has two end points, so we know it's not a line that keeps on going forever. It has stopping points. Okay, so we're going to go over the first part of the distance and midpoint practice hand sheet that I gave you, okay? Alright, so on the first part, it says distance. Y'all follow me on the overhead while I do this on the paper, okay? Alright, so we're going to start from point A, and it says measure the distance from point A to point B in inches. So we're going to measure from point A to point B, and I have my ruler on the inches side, okay? Alright, so from point A to point B, I see 6 inches. Okay, so I'm going to move my ruler up here and I'm going to write 6 inches in the distance. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back and measure it one more time just to make sure that I'm doing it right, okay? So one more time and look. Okay, good. From A to B, I get 6 inches. Alright, let's look at the next one. Measure the distance from point X to point Y in centimeters. So we're going to have to flip our ruler around, and we're going to measure from point X to point Y in centimeters. When I do that, I get 10 centimeters. Okay, so we're going to write 10 centimeters next to distance. Okay, go back and check it one more time. Good, 10 centimeters. Then the last one, there is no actual line segment. We just have 2 points. So let's read it. Measure the distance from point Q to point R in centimeters. Draw the line segment. Okay, so we're going to go from point Q to point R, and I get 14 centimeters. Now from there, I'm going to draw my line segment. So I have a 14 centimeter line segment, and we're going to write 14 centimeters in the distance. Okay? Alright, that was good. Now the second part says midpoint, so we're going to talk for a second about midpoint. Can anyone tell me if they've ever heard of a midpoint before? No? Okay. Well, a midpoint is the spot exactly in the middle of the line segment. How do you think we could find the midpoint of a whole line segment?
You can fold the line in half and find the middle.
Good. Okay, so let's pretend that this entire paper is our line, right across here. If this was our line, then I could fold it in half, and wherever the fold is, that would be our midpoint, which means it would be equal distance from this edge of the paper to the midpoint, and from this edge of the paper to the midpoint. Good job. Okay, so we can't always fold a line in half. So, going along with that idea, what if we measure the distance with our ruler of the line segment? What could we do with the information to find the midpoint if we have the line segment with our ruler?
Find the middle of that number?
Good! Oh, that's perfect. Okay. we're going to find the middle of the number. So let's say, for example, that I have a distance from point A to point B of 10 inches, 10 inches. Then my midpoint is going to be at 5 inches, okay? So distance of 10 inches, midpoint of 5 inches. Now let's say my distance is 8 inches. My midpoint would be 4 inches. Okay, what am I doing to find that middle number? If I'm going from 10 to 5 and 8 to 4, what am I doing?
It's half of them.
Good, perfect. Okay, so we must find the entire distance. So in this example, our entire distance is 10 inches. And then we need to find half of 10. And we know that half of 10 is 5, because 5 times 2 is 10. All right, so if my distance was 6 inches, what would my midpoint be?
3.
Perfect. Okay, what if my distance was 12 centimeters? What would my midpoint be?
6 centimeters.
Good job. Okay, so let's do the second part of that worksheet that we were doing before, the distance, midpoint, and practice. And number 1 on midpoint says, find the midpoint between point A and point B and label it point M. Show your work. Okay, so we know that the distance is 6 inches, so we're going to have to put 6 inches, and we're going to divide it by 2 to find out what half of 6 is. So 6 divided by 2 is?
3.
Good job. Okay, 3. So let's go back up here and let's measure. We have point A at 0, and then all the way over point B is at 6 inches. So let's find our 3-inch mark and make a little point, and let's label it M for midpoint. The next one, find the midpoint between point X and point Y and label it point M. Show your work. Okay, so point X to point Y we found out was 10 centimeters. So we are going to need to write 10 centimeters divided by 2 equals 5. Okay, so let's flip our ruler around, measure it out. We have 10 centimeters. So let's find our 5 centimeter mark and draw a dot right there. Okay, and we're going to label that M. And on our last one, point Q to point R, we've drawn in our line segment earlier. We had 14 centimeters, so 14 divided by 2 equals
7.
Good job. Okay, so 14, half of 14 is 7. Put our point and mark it with an M. Okay, so is that making sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, class. Now that you have mastered that, we're going to move on to candy math.